And I wanted to cover the areas of circularity because I think it's really important for us all. And we've got some sort of kind of examples that we will talk our way through, areas that we'll actually discuss. So it's 4 o'clock. I want to crack on because we've got quite a lot of content to cover, and it'd be quite interesting to see where we are by the end of the session. So it's myself sort of kind of doing the bulk of that kind of heavy lifting at the start to get ourselves focused on the world of circularity and what we mean by that. So this is our fourth webinar of 2024. We do one, and we try to do one pretty much every month. And we sort of focus on a broad spectrum of things. So we've covered everything from brand storytelling so far, right the way through to sort of looking at various different trends. We've looked and thought through different areas of the business models and various things like that. So we try to cover a lot of things. And one of the areas that we're very keen to develop and keen to facilitate within this particular space is conversations around sustainability. And this is a really important topic for us. It's something that we feel offers real value, but it also, more importantly, does us, the world, a greater service. The more that we talk about it, the more we think about it, the more we represent that within our own business models and our own sort of ways of defining and delivering things. If you have a particular topic of conversation, then please contact myself either via LinkedIn or via the community, and you can direct message me. You can talk about what you would like to listen to, what you would like to hear about, and we can discuss that. I was hoping, that we would be looking more in terms of the circularity stuff because Vicky, who is our sort of social media side of the thing, she's just written a dissertation on circularity for her degree. So I did try and tempt her into sort of kind of giving her flavor of it. But unfortunately, she's still working on that dissertation. So pretty much every moment that she has is focused upon submitting that piece of work. But it's I want to introduce you very quickly to the team because the team is growing. This is our team as it is at the moment. Adam, who is our communications director. There's myself, Magdalena, who is our chief facilitator, really. She works with us to deliver various different programs. We work together down at the university, and we've delivered many different programs together accordingly. There's Vicky, who is our social media manager, and Sandrine, who has joined us in primarily to look after, if you like, and to develop some aspect of mindset resilience building for founders, business people within the community. In a way, it's our kind of endorsement to say that this is something that we fundamentally believe. I think the statistics are pretty horrendous when it comes to people working as business owners and founders. I think the last numbers I saw were 49% of business owners were thinking of throwing in the towel simply based on the fact that they are burnt out and they're working many, many hours and they're really sort of kind of on that hamster wheel of work. And I think that's one fundamental thing that we wanted to cover within the week was this idea of a space, a founder space, which is psychologically safe, a place where people can vent, a place where people can participate, pick up skills, pick up talent, pick up opportunities, and actually start to pause. And I think our commitment to that is certainly when Sandrine joined us to actually start to talk about that community well-being side of things. And I think that's really important in that regard. So that's our current team at the moment. We're always sort of looking at ways of developing and moving it forward. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to be covering quite a bit about circularity. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be looking at the difference between and what we mean by linear business models and circular business models. And we're going to try to understand a little bit more about how those can be applied to our business and some examples from the region and some of the areas that we're really sort of kind of focused on in that regard. Then we want to lead by sort of kind of demonstrating that you have to kind of build that ecosystem, that layer of collaboration in order that you start to think about how we can work together to solve this greater challenge, which is ultimately something that we're very sort of kind of committed to. How can you actually start to think about not just in the world of materials, but also in the world of just kind of the supply chains, rethinking about things and the rest. So leading by an example, leading at the end of the day, putting ourselves all into that particular community. The other side of that is we want to discuss and show some, demonstrate some particular strategies that will actually business models, live businesses that are engaging in that circular world. I won't dwell on this particularly too much, but ultimately from the perspective of myself, I work very much down at the University of Essex. The Weave is my and Adams and pretty much the whole team's baby of way of demonstrating our commitment and our ambitions to really ignite that ecosystem and to show our regional qualities as a entrepreneurial area. Working down at the university, and I was there last night till quite late. We had a showcase event down there where we were looking at a number of different businesses and getting them to present, and also awarding them with certificates and prizes around what they've been doing over that period of time. So it's a really great space. It's a really entrepreneurial space. And I think over the last 7 or 8 years that I've been working really in and around the university, that culture, that enterprise culture, that entrepreneurial culture is developing in every shape and form. And I think we saw that last night at the showcase event at the Innovation Centre. It was a great event. We had some great speakers and we had a lot of quality coming through, thinking about businesses and thinking about growth. But I'm not doing this alone tonight. And I'm really, really delighted that Becky Baines can join us. And Becky is, I'll let Becky introduce herself, but Becky is somebody I've kind of known from Colby for a while, but I've also known because her business is a really exciting kind of concept, and she brings an enthusiasm and a passion to circularity, to sustainability. So Becky, I don't know if I can actually invite you. Let me just see if I can do this. This is how we figure out how these things work. Let me just go. I want to invite you into that particular space. So how do I do that? Can you just make sure that you can join us? Okay, I need to figure out, sorry, I'm just going to need to figure out how to bring Becky into the conversations, which is breakout rooms, integration. Let me... okay, that's irritating because I can't figure out how to do that. Hold on one sec. Your buttons are not available. Okay, that makes sense. Let me just find out how we do this. Go into this. Is there? Okay, it's irritating. I'm sorry to do that. I'm just trying to see if there's a way, something obvious that I'm missing. And all of this, a button that says if I click on speaker, send message, that's fine. There's a direct chat, but is there... direct message? Right, okay, I'm going to have to figure that out in a second as we do it. We'll continue on. I'll introduce Becky and then let me just speaker guide. So it just says here, disable VPN firewalls, use headsets and close and go to. Is there a button that says go to backstage, Becky, that you're seeing? Is there a button there that says go backstage? Once logged in, all speakers can join the host at backstage before the session goes live. Click the go backstage button on the top left of the screen on the webinar. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'm sorry, we're going to have to try and figure this out as we go along. What I'll do is I'll continue to go through this and then ultimately I'll come back to it and then see where we are on the back of it. I apologize. I thought it was seemed to be quite straightforward when we did it before, but obviously something's changed in the webinar settings. So I will figure it out as we go forward. Let me just keep having a look at that. Right. Okay. Well, let's just say that Becky is, that sums up Becky down there in terms of who she is. She's a highly accomplished entrepreneur within this particular area. She's, done an awful lot in the region around sustainability and around circular business work. So ultimately, we will get to hear about her, whether we have to come offline from this and go into a Zoom and get people to come in on the back of the Zoom link. I'm not sure how we're going to do it, but we will end up recording her session. We will end up being able to share her session and blend the two videos into that particular process. So we will get there and figure that out along the way. I don't quite know why it's not easy just to push a button and say, whether I have to stop presenting or whether I can hand over the mic or whatever in that regard. So let me just continue on. So we've got some stuff that we're covering from that side of things. Okay, so we're very much involved in the idea of whatever a system is in terms of the business. We're always thinking in terms of those three parameters of a startup business: purpose, which is ultimately the clear outcome that we're trying to achieve within our business, the kind of elements that we need to make that business happen. And we often use a tool called the business model canvas, which breaks down the elements of a business into 9 building blocks. We use other canvases all the time, but that's the one that is the foundational canvas that we tend to lean back into when we talk about business and business development. And then ultimately the kind of interactions that we want to create within the business that will allow us to be able to actually do that. So I think that, this idea of a business as a system is how this business comes together, how it works collectively in each of those relevant areas. And it's important to understand that even the simplest of businesses is a system, and that it's there to deliver a purpose. There's a great talk by Simon Sinek talking about about the metaphor of a car and a vehicle when it comes to actually thinking about business and business development. And I think that's a really kind of interesting way of doing it. And you can always find out more about that kind of thing. But ultimately, businesses sit in the middle of a system, and the business itself is a subcomponent or a subsystem of the wider regional economy, the wider national economy, and the global economy. So it all, revolves around those interconnected areas. And this is why we focus upon business development within that systemic framework. So the thing that we're also talking about today is that idea about sustainability. And what is that kind of concept of sustainability? There are multiple definitions of it out there and what it really means and why it's important as well, because, we talk about businesses and we talk about the CO2, we talk about COP28, COP31, whatever the number is of that kind of thing that we go through. And it's challenging to keep the momentum going. And it's also really important to understand that no matter where we are in the in this particular journey, that there will always be elements of doubters and people who stand against this particular perspective. But some of the numbers are clear, and some of the numbers are very sort of kind of compelling in what they mean. But what we mean, or what I think there's a really useful kind of definition, and I think this covers it pretty much. It's that kind of idea of what we do today, the digging of the ground, the turning over the soil today, and the fact that we try to do that for the benefit of something that we're delivering in the future, and that we want to meet those needs in the future. So we're not about doing harm. And I think this is why you get a little bit frustrating for a lot of businesses, is because they probably don't necessarily disagree with that, but they don't necessarily know how to actually engage with it. And the other side of that is that many businesses think, oh, if you're sustainable, if you're socially impactful, if you're doing this, that, and the other, you must be either a social entrepreneur or social enterprise, or a community interest company, or a charity, and not for profit. And that's far from true. That's not the case at all. You definitely can be a traditional for-profit business, but at the end of the day, what you're actually saying is that you understand that every time we engage in a particular space, we are fundamentally engaging in that systemic environment. We're engaging where our impacts have legacy. They have ripples in that particular pond. So this kind of concept, you and your business that sit in that kind of wider situation, the wider environment, is really important. And I think that a systemic startup is one that recognizes that quite clearly, does desperately want to do something purposeful within what it's doing, but ultimately is thinking rather about the surface level problems that it's addressing, but it's actually going deeper. It's looking for the root causes. It's looking for the challenges around what it's actually trying to achieve. And I think it makes it a lot more purposeful, a lot more meaningful as a business. And I think that's something, again, which is really valuable for entrepreneurs to recognize, is that no matter what they're doing in life, and last night I was listening to a guy called Ankit who'd developed a particular business in India, a bit like Open Table. It was an app, it was an application. He was talking about his journey. They'd sold their business for a considerable exit amount, going forward. So he was sort of in that mindset of investing back into different businesses. And even though, he didn't specifically talk about issues around sustainability and all the rest of it, his values were actually very interesting. And I think that was something, again, that even though it wasn't explicit in his conversation and his delivery, he was very much talking about nurturing the young people, talking about creating opportunities, talking about solving wider problems, creating, opportunities for restaurants and for people and for all of that kind of thing. So there was a perception of a wider impact that he was definitely looking at and thinking very much about. So this is a kind of a rough outline of what we call the business model canvas. It's an application of the canvas. There's a really good blog, 14 ways to use the canvas. I think there are many, many more ways. And one of the ways that we often use it is as a technological roadmap. We talk about the technologies that are embedded in each relevant area. There's plenty of resources within the community that look at the business model canvas, and we've got many webinars and different sort of kind of areas. So I'm not going to go and give you a detailed perspective, but if I say to you, as you look at that canvas, everything on the right hand side of it as you're looking at it is what we call customer facing, and everything on the left hand side of the canvas we call the behind the scenes, the things at the end of the day that drive the value of the business. So the 9 building blocks, and the central building block is the value proposition, the thing at the end of the day that we provide, the value exchange that we create. You've got customer relationships, the channels that we find our customers, and ultimately the segments that we're addressing for that value proposition. So we are clearly identifying, understanding who the client is, who the customer is in that particular process. And then ultimately at the bottom, the two kind of the two rectangles at the bottom, one on the right is all about revenue streams within our business. The one on the left is all about our costs. The far left, as you're looking at it, the two people shaking hands, they are partners and the partnerships that we build. And this again is massively important in the world of sustainability, that we're thinking about partnerships, we're thinking about collaboration. Then we've got the key resources, the capitals that we have access to, the human capital, social capital, natural capitals, ecological capital that we're involved with, all of the relevant financial capital, everything that we have available to make those key activities happen within the business that then ultimately drives the delivery of the value proposition. So that's really, at the end of the day, the nutshell of it. Most people look at the canvas and they think of it in terms of blocks to fill in, silos of activity, but they're not. They're all interconnected and they feed off each other. Change the value proposition, make the value proposition more sustainable, think about the purpose of the value proposition, what you're trying to achieve with that. Then you're going to alter and modify the channels, the relationships that you have with your customers, and then ultimately who your customer really is and the revenue streams that drive from. So it's a great space to create narrative and a great space to build a deeper appreciation of the way that your business works. So today we're going to be thinking about it in terms of strategy. We're going to be thinking in terms of how do we implement business models that are both sustainable and, where possible, circular in what they're trying to achieve. We're also going to be looking at innovation, because that ultimately means that we're bringing in new and novel ways of delivering this. And then we're ultimately going to be looking at the customer insights and the journey that might happen when you're creating something like this particular process. And it does open up pathways. It does open up different ways of working and different ways of establishing those relationships. And ultimately, the one thing that we do look at from the point of view of this is about co-creation. This idea that if we go to our customers, if we engage with our customers effectively and ask and inquire and develop, we can co-create ideas. We can co-create solutions. And one of the things that was very interesting again last night when we had one of these conversations with an entrepreneur was a young entrepreneur, and she's got a platform that helps nail technicians and the like, and she had a lot of issues in terms of delivering her particular application to market. And because she had problems and delays and all the rest of it, she was very fearful that she would be upsetting her audience and delaying that particular piece of delivery. But what she found was actually she used that time to understand more detail about what that community really wanted. And going from that, she was co-creating stuff for her business in terms of what were the next challenges and what she needed to do. So that was a really kind of interesting way of looking at a business and a way of thinking. This is how we use the canvas. We help people develop that particular idea. And in the world of sustainability, we could probably click on all of those relevant things, but those things are what we're actually really looking at. I think measurement is one of those things that we definitely need to be thinking through when we are applying some kind of sustainable model to our business. So circularity, circular business models. Let's take a think about the linear process. So the linear process is the take, use, and dispose kind of process that a lot of businesses really truthfully engage with. So if you look at fast fashion, the idea being is that we basically create and we make as much as we possibly can. We provide it at a cheap enough price. It gets used in a very, very short period of time. And some of the statistics in the fast fashion industry are hugely concerning. And then we end up dumping and disposing that into landfill. I think that I don't know whether these numbers are changing, but I do remember a while ago, I remember reading something about that cycle of that linear process of take, make, use, and dispose was ultimately within 2 to 3 months of, or it might even be less than that, of actually purchasing that particular item. So that fast fashion process accentuates or shines a light on the linear process and the way at the end of the day the linear things work. Circularity has a different process. It asks the question, what can we do, all right, from what we've already created? what can we avoid doing instead of creating product in terms of virgin material like picking cotton, growing cotton, which absorbs huge amounts of water. What can we do from the recycled process? What can we do from the repurposing of different areas? That whole kind of circularity is about creating longevity of the supply chain into our business and thinking about that long and hard. And that idea of reusing, repurposing, of if you like, frugality and the way that we want to do it actually is about efficiencies and not about sacrificing quality or anything along those lines. It's actually switching over and reimagining that particular process. I do a program, a kind of piece of delivery when we talk about business model development, and one of the models that we always talk about is the business model of a cow, and we talk about the multiple ways that you can use or engage with cows to generate different revenue streams, different areas of businesses and development. And one of the things that we look at in terms of that is we always refer back to that day within the world where you had an electric vehicle with glass bottles of milk delivered to your doorstep. And at the end of that, your milkman would reappear in his electric vehicle, collect those empty bottles, clean them, wash them, refill them, put them back in. It was actually an incredibly powerful circular model. It was a longevity. Those bottles would last. The whole process would last. The driving around. Actually, to be honest, it used to be a horse and cart. That's going back, shows my age, where I can remember the first sort of horse and cart appearing down the road, doing milk. But in the world of electric vehicles, that was quite an interesting area and where we are today. So we can learn a lot from the past about this kind of thing, but equally we can think about this from the perspective of what technology can actually open up for us in this particular world. So this circularity is very much thinking through about efficiencies and effectiveness of keeping and extending what we have for longer periods. And that might well be about buying quality at the first end, but it might also be about how we engage with different businesses to extend that. So there is, at the end of it all, a serious element to it. There is something at the end of the day, a problem that as a systemic startup or as a business that we're really interested in contributing positively to. And I think it's really important that we actually identify some of those particular areas. And I think we can become quite dismissive of it. And I think when I was doing this particular presentation, there's a lot of, and I was reading a lot of cynicism about the data, cynicism about what we're doing. So I was very clear about where I wanted to go for the data, what I wanted to look at in that regard. And I think it's important in that particular space. So this was one area that I think clearly identifies what's happening since, over the last, since 1851 to today. We're through that industrial area. Now, there will be people out there that will be looking at this and be saying, yeah, but it's, this may well have happened in the past. The data may not have collected it, all the rest of it. But I think at the end of it, we can always deny it. But actually acknowledging it is something that we need to all do as well. So from that perspective, those deniers, those climate deniers, the people that say that this isn't real, at the end of it all, what's stopping us not agreeing with it? I mean, people think of it as a tax or as a disadvantage. Well, why? Because at the end of it all, what we're actually saying is there is a better way and a more efficient way of running our businesses that actually, like thinking about that, the milk cart, the electric vehicles and all the rest of it, that actually we've lost contact with in our world as we do it now and the things that we do. So there's lots of stuff going on in that particular world and that kind of area and where it's all kind of coming through fossil fuels, agriculture, all of these things that are adding to the whole kind of production of CO2 and nitrogen gases and various other things within the atmosphere that's keeping the temperatures at the end of the day rising within the world. And I think that's kind of important because, again, when we look at it from a map perspective, the average monthly surface temperature maps, we can see that back in the 1940s, the red maps, there was real sort of kind of intensity of color in certain areas in Australia, but predominantly everything was much cooler, right, in that area. From 2024, the same map shows the extent to which things have heated up, the extent to which the global temperatures are rising. And it doesn't take much to witness that from anecdotal evidence of anything from droughts to floods, because obviously from that perspective, more heat, more heating of the atmosphere, more temperature rising, more water being evaporated from our seas going into that particular space. All of that creates pockets of rivers, sky rivers and things like that just literally dump water as and when. So we had images again of anything from I guess the Middle East being underwater not long ago, right the way through to the Californian floods this year. And that's something, again, which we can't necessarily deny. So it's important, again, why are we interested in circularity? Why are we interested in sustainability? Why are we interested in this whole kind of process? Because anecdotally, there's evidence to suggest that the world is getting hotter and we need to constantly thinking about how we can readdress this. And obviously governments and various different political parties and all across the globe are paying lip service in a lot of respects to it. And some are taking it vastly more seriously. But at the end of it all, that kind of sea temperature rise is another area of thinking about it. And in the Northern Hemisphere, it's accentuated. But we're also losing quite high levels of ice flow, of various things within that. And the net result within that is that we're going to see, or we are seeing, sea levels rise. And if you extrapolate those levels out there, it gets more and more scary. And if you think about it from the perspective of where those sea levels are rising and how, across the whole kind of globe, then ultimately those pockets of land are very, very susceptible to being washed away. And actually, as this chart shows, you can see that, within that space, Europe, the UK, parts of the Netherlands, that sort of space within that, there are, there are sort of implications and concerns about the impact of rising sea levels and where people may end up being displaced, where people may end up losing land. And from the UK's perspective, that's obviously a significant issue that we're facing. So that's why, again, if we're not taking these things seriously, that's why we should be taking them seriously. Okay, from the point of view, again, what does it do to people's mindset and perceptions? And maybe this is something that we should be thinking about as well within that particular area. So globally, the impact on people's thinking is quite significant. And if they, and when they were confronted with this particular question across various different countries, lots of different things, is, there is some apocalyptic stuff within that particular space. But the net result out of all of this is that the next generation are becoming more attuned to this kind of concept of climate change. And we see a lot of it. There isn't, I think, within the university, most of the businesses that we talk about within the university, a large proportion of them are all talking about adding value towards this particular debate. Some don't necessarily go through the full process, but some very clearly identify where they are thinking about what they need to be thinking through and stopping doing in order that they can actually start to make a positive impact. Some things have happened over just lately that are really interesting as well. And I think they bear in mind, again, setting precedents and thinking about where we are. So not that long ago, Switzerland, I think some people from Switzerland took the Swiss government to the Court of Human Rights and basically charged them with violating their human rights because they hadn't done enough for climate change. And so ultimately, from that perspective, there are potential, they won that particular argument in that particular area. So there are precedents that people could do. And I guess that you could be looking at the UK government and saying, are we doing enough? We talk about it, we do lots of different things, but then we send out mixed messages about oil businesses and various things like that. But I think at the core level, the ground, like I said, the next generation at the grassroots level, there is still a propensity of people that do take this very seriously and want to bring in different business models that at the end of the day could actually achieve something of value. But it isn't all bad news. We've come a long way in these conversations. When you think about it, COP28, various things, there's lots of evidence to suggest that the future, if we focus in and if we keep working on these particular areas around sustainability, and we start leaning into those particular opportunities, that we can pull back from the brink, we can start to readdress some of these particular issues. And some of the experts say, if we continue in this particular way, that's something that can happen, that can do something within that particular space and make things, if you like, better as we go forward. But the clear caveat of all of that is that we have to, continue. We have to deliver that kind of process. And I think from that perspective, we have to kind of really work at it from there. So when we think about this from there, what we have, if you like, is a charter, or something at the end of the day that we're looking for in that. We're seeing a lot more from the investment community around this, around our environmental sustainable goals, that people are actually looking, or governance, environmental sustainable governance, that people are actually looking and investing more and more into this particular area, this particular field. So we've got more and more investment coming in, sustainable investment. More entrepreneurs are certainly driving the change and engaging with circular economy. We get to see more and more of that. John Elkington, who is one of the gurus around sustainability. There's a really good book, and I've got a list of resources at the end of the presentation that I'll share with everybody. But ultimately, from that perspective, John Elkington is somebody along the lines of, on Wikipedia, he's quoted as being the second or third most important person around sustainability. Great book that he wrote was a great book called Green Swans. He's written a lot of books talking about this particular thing, but that's very much focused upon regenerative capitalism. And I only talk about him because he's actually an alumni of Essex University, and he graduated there in 1968. And if you look at one of our Interwoven podcasts, I think it's episode 2 or 3, John is very kindly talking to Alex O'Neill, one of the people that we work with, who ultimately was talking through about sustainability, the challenges, the future. It's a really interesting article, and he's a very, very informative and powerful talker when it comes to that. So it's about opportunity. Like I said, there are lots of opportunities to move this forward. We can create more jobs through this particular process. McKinsey, I think in one of their particular articles, or it might have been Judge Business School, who said that we can create somewhere in the region of 24 million global new jobs within this area by tackling climate change, by tackling circularity and sustainability. And from that point of view, it's a huge multi-trillion-dollar opportunity that will get us into a better world and a better space. But we have to grasp it. We have to do it from the grassroots levels. It's great that governments will impose different things from COP28 right the way through. It's great that organizations like IKEA, Patagonia, Unilever, people like that are really sort of engaging with the world of sustainability. But actually, if we're going to make a difference, it's those people at the grassroots levels that are building things that can grow and scale, that really will change the dynamics. And we'll be talking about a few of those businesses a little bit later on. Some of them definitely from our region. So we've got that particular opportunity in that particular space. And I think, again, I called upon this from the point of view of cynicism, because if you ever read social media and social media posts, and if you think about the kind of trolling that goes on within that particular space, it does lead to that world of cynicism. But actually, what we have to do is counteract that cynicism with evidence and with action and with observation about things that are changing underlyingly within that particular space. We have to stand up to the forces of what I would call kind of not uninformed or ill-informed, but certainly ideas and perspectives that don't chime with both the vision or the reality of what we're seeing, and ultimately the evidence that people are collecting in this particular process. And I come back to this whole kind of concept of what's the downside of not doing this? What's the downside of not engaging with sustainability. And if we are heading towards crisis and a greater crisis than we have now, then we should be doing more, to correct that. But equally, if we are misjudged and climate change isn't real, it doesn't matter, because at the end of it all, we're still building efficiencies and better ways of doing business. So from that perspective, it's win-win as far as I can see through the whole kind of process. But what we really need to do is buy into the evidence and go with our gut instinct and say, yeah, things are deteriorating and we need to, at the grassroots level, change the dynamics around that. So how and what can we do in that particular area? Again, you could be cynical. We've had these goals now for quite some time, and we're potentially nowhere near hitting any of them. But they still do yield some form of cohesion around people's activity, and they align communities, they align aspirations, they align that kind of place and space where people feel connected within this particular process. So the UN sustainability goals, which were, I think, initially started sometime in 2015, ultimately can be broken down into those three areas: the kind of people, the human connected goals that we're looking at, the ecological connected goals, which again, we can look at from that perspective in terms of the, what we're talking about today. And the spiritual goals, the place in the, if you like, the working in partnerships, the working together, the collaboration, that kind of thing within that particular space. But actually, rather than think of them as three layers, I prefer to think of them as three interconnected aspects of what we're about. At the heart of everything is the human experience. The heart of everything is what we're trying to do is alleviate unfairness, inequality, all of those things that we can potentially sort of talk more about in that particular area. And by doing that and collectively shaping that around the impacts that we're making in the world, we can, improve that collaboration, improve that kind of environment. For a lot of people, or some people might think of it as being rather kind of woolly and a bit sort of, not necessarily businesslike. But actually, when you think about it, the amount of money that's being raised in each of those relevant areas to deliver value in any shape and form is huge. And, you can either ignore it or you can be a part of it. And like I said, I don't think there's any downside in being a part of this. I think it's all upside to get on with it and to do stuff within this particular space. So how do you ascribe to those? I'm not going to read each of those elements out, but you can actually figure out within that particular space what's relevant. So the human goals there, the health and well-being, that kind of stuff within that, decent work and economic growth. I think all of these things are just so interconnected. If you get, decent economic growth and, sort of kind of a great space and an area, your whole region raises itself up. That leads to better health and better well-being, far better mental health within that particular space. There's more investment into education. There's more investment into, eradicating some of those inequalities that exist. So there's lots and lots of stuff that we can do, and that's where it's all interrelated within that particular area. So the affordable and clean energy, that's something obviously that we're dealing with again within that circularity area, and of thinking about it from that perspective of what can we do and how we can deliver that. And again, in this particular area, there are certain things around that: responsible consumption and production, stuff there at the end of the day that we're saying, look, are we using recycled product? Are we using materials? So, we get businesses all the time that come to us to actually address this particular area. And one of the fundamental things that they say is it's expensive. Right? It's expensive for me to ship my supply chain from where I'm getting stuff out in the Asian economies and China and bring them back to the UK and using recycled product. Yes, it is, but we have to overcome that. We have to figure out through our business models how we can actually start almost to subsidize some of this cost so that ultimately we can start to then create economies of scale within our business and grow what we're doing. So, it's not just a simple kind of process of denying it and saying this is really, really hard to do because it costs us more money. It's actually a process of how can I modify my business model in order that I can find a way to subsidize that price so that I can keep the costs lower, grow the business accordingly, and actually have something at the other side which also generates revenue, whether that be educational, whether it be some other aspect of what we're doing within that, turning a product into a service, that kind of area. So again, those sorts of things are really, really interesting. Climate action, again, really important, actually thinking about educating people about what's going on within the climate world, thinking about it from that perspective, putting ourselves into the public affray, getting people to actually question what we're doing within that particular space. All of that's really important. And I think this one is, for us, probably within the weave, the biggest one that we really, really focus on is that idea of, okay, we need to build an ecosystem of partnerships, whether that's university or whether it's small businesses. Prime example today, sitting at my LinkedIn, some guy came back to me and said, is the region big enough to actually create some form of founder entrepreneurial network that really does work in this particular space? And my answer to him was absolutely. The best way of doing it is just to hit the button and go. We run, or we co-host, should I say, People Planet Pint with Climbing Trees and Alex Holliman's team there. Climbing Trees are a B Corp, and a B Corp is a beneficial corporation, and it's a model of sustainability, and it's one that we would absolutely champion people to get involved with. But again, there's a cost to doing that, to actually raise yourself to that particular level. And it's not cheap to join the club. But if it's something at the end of the day that long-term within your business would become a significant asset to your business and the way that you speak about your business, then it's definitely a mark and a set of criteria that really does hold significant value to pursue, despite the challenges around that. So this Partnerships for Goals is something which we really do kind of work in, and our ecosystem model is about, if we've got a entrepreneurial community, how do we create value for that entrepreneurial community? What do we do within that particular space that can add value, whether it's internally using people's mindsets or using people's education, knowledge sharing, tacit, experiential knowledge sharing, running events, doing things within that particular space that get people learning together, talking together, solving problems and challenges together. And that's something, again, that we're really focused on within the weave. So ecosystem building for us is about finding how we can create greater value through partnerships with people. So those are the kind of the UN goals. They really do. There's a lot of them. If you Google them online, you'll get loads of resources. And again, I've got some resources at the end of the program that will actually give you the opportunity to engage with those. And again, come back to this idea of not seeing things as silos, not choosing one or two goals and saying, yeah, that's where we are at, is actually looking at each of the individual goals and actually saying, where are those interconnections? Where can we build, if you like, or where can we understand the causality and the cause and effects of everything that we're trying to achieve within that particular space? So many businesses that I meet and all the rest of it, they talk to me about, oh, we've got a supplier out here and we do this, that, and the other. And I just challenge them to understand, well, if your supply chain is broken, what does it mean for your business? And the bottom line is that what we really need to do is build resilience into our supply chains. And that means investing more and more time in understanding the demands of the supply chain, figuring out where the alternatives lie and what we can do to actually encourage differentiation and development of the supply chain, investing back into it, thinking about those different alternatives. And the best businesses in the world are the ones that own the entire vertical of their supply chain. They actually understand that they need to control all of those relevant dynamics. So the life cycle, the extension of the business, how it engages that is not a linear process, but how do we create flywheels? How do we create that kind of movement through each individual element of the business? So we can engage with circularity and sustainability at multiple different levels. We can do from an individual perspective, which is something that we're really focused on here. How can we stimulate the pond? How can we create ripples within that particular area? How can we really start to um, engage with it passionately, educate people in it, talk about it, change and modify our businesses accordingly, and how we can infect that positivity and urgency and passion and real dynamics into the teams and the groups and the communities that we are ourselves a part of. That's really crucial to this whole kind of process. And then from that, again, what does that mean organizationally? How does that work from the bigger organizations? So when we look at a, say, for instance, a bank, and we have our banking with a particular organization, it's comforting to know that we've got a relationship with a particular bank. But if we don't challenge that bank, if we don't look at that bank and say, what are you doing as an organization, as a bank, we're abdicating that responsibility onto them. And that's not good enough. From teams and groups, we need to be able to actually hold everybody accountable within that particular space and hold ourselves accountable accordingly. And then ultimately, from that perspective, creating those channels of advocacy, of visibility, of argument directly into the legislative bodies that we actually are accountable to and work with. And actually, that's how we can really start to do it. So this imposition of government down sustainability from a regulatory perspective and a tax perspective will come, right? And it's starting to come. Manifestly, it'll start to come. But I think from our perspective, we've got to raise the level up from the bottom so that we're meeting that level of direction or ambition really in the middle of the whole place at the organizational level. So why does it matter and what does it do for us in that regard? Okay, so why does it matter? Growth, getting access to, kind of better resources, attracting more customers by sheer fact of being able to help them achieve what they want to do within their business. I think that's, again, really crucial. And I think one of the things that you find when you work, say, maybe if you've got a piece of business that you're looking at from a procurement perspective, you're thinking about, maybe I want to work with a university, or maybe I want to work with the local authorities or schools, or maybe I want to do this, or something like that. But the bottom line of it is, right, those organizations, they themselves are changing to become more specific about who they want to work with. So there is a social and ecological footprint that they are reaching back out to. So we want to deepen the pool. We want to grow those resources and those customers within each of those areas. We need to start thinking about how we promote, how we talk about, how we modify our own strategies to be able to actually deliver that. And that will ultimately drive more ambition, more growth within the business. The alternative, we carry on doing what we're doing. When the world changes, we get forced to change. In the meantime, we'll probably lose more and more of our customers, and we end up having to explain away why we're doing what we're doing to the next generation. And I think that's a piece of accountability that's uncomfortable. And I think when I started to think about this long and hard, it was my grandchildren that were the ones that really bizarrely asking me the questions of, how does this work and what does that do, that made me think about what I needed to do in terms of change the way that we work and the way that we organize ourselves. From the point of view of cost management, is like I said, and we've been talking about it through here, you reduce energy consumption, you lower cost, you create flywheels in your business, you create efficiencies, you bring technology into your business, you create gaps, and you create places where space can go. You can do all of that within that particular space by simply reimagining your processes and rethinking through what it is that you're trying to achieve within your business, and actually setting yourself those objectives and goals and making them relevant to cost reduction and efficiency savings. What you end up doing within that is self-perpetuating that particular process. The alternatives on that side of it will obviously more waste and more inefficiency. I did a program the other week for Edge Business School, which is the hotel chain down at the Wivenhoe House. we did a process of business model development with them. And one of the things that we were focused upon was, how do you bring circularity into the hospitality industry? What can we do within the hospitality industry that can change the existing dynamics of waste and modify and remodify that for the benefit of the business, but also for the benefit of the wider stakeholders? It was an interesting process. It was a lot of really kind of heavy debate and enthusiasm. And I think from the perspective I walked away from it was that if our hands in the hospitality industry are in the control of these guys that we were dealing with, then we've got a really positive hospitality industry to look forward to. And let's not underestimate the value of hospitality. It's a human space. It's the place where we want to be. I hate seeing, the hospitality industry become decimated by high costs, inefficiencies, wastes, and ineffective human engagement. And at the end of it all, that's what hospitality is all about, is human engagement. So really, it was an interesting kind of piece of delivery, and one that we really focused on. But if you don't engage in it, it's a kind of, I guess, infects the other aspects of the business and makes it less likely to achieve something. So talent acquisition, and like I said to you, the generation coming up behind us, the Gen Zs, the millennials, the people like that, these are people who are absolutely, they don't want to work with an organization that's has got muddy paws and not want to do these things. They want to work with an organization that they want to be proud of, and they want to get to know what they're all about. They want the organization, not just simply from the perspective of having a good job, a quality job, raising the value of what they're doing there, but also knowing that they're actually doing something beyond the scope of a job, something at the end of the day that they can feel proud of and proud to be a part of. So from that perspective, it's really important for the talent acquisition and management side of the business for that to take hold in terms of circularity and sustainability. And the downside of that is that you won't access the talent pool. You will probably access people who will be joining you for the wrong reasons, and ultimately you're not going to get the value out of them that you think you're going to get. And that in itself will just make you a very short-term kind of business. You're one that's really invested in the now and not looking towards the future. And I think that if you're going to build a business, you've got to be building about a business with an idea of either legacy or exit. Where do I want to go? When they're both the same at the end of the day. What is your legacy? What do you want to leave behind? What is the value of the exit that you're looking to achieve within this? How are you going to do it? And if you spend time developing and growing this within this particular space, you will end up with a far more valuable business with a longer term strategy, and ultimately a greater level of profitability, and something which people will feel very much that they want to be invested in and be a part of. So these are really important processes, and I think from that perspective, they're just a reason again why we need to be involved and why we need to be engaged in doing this. So moving on, we're going to be talking a little bit about business models. So there are basically three kind of primary business models that we think through when we're in this. The first one is about creating a service from a product, changing the dynamics. So rather than going out and selling bikes or doing various things within that particular space, what we're looking at is recapturing, reusing, repurposing. We're looking at some way that actually creates a service from the repurposing or the redevelopment of the product. Hire, not acquire, that kind of model, but within that particular space. Giving people rewards for positive behavior. Again, there's a degree of gamification within that area, and that's something which really does appeal to a lot of businesses going forward. How can we create rewards? How can we reward the right kind of behaviors? If you give somebody a loyalty card that encourages them to spend more money, right, with you, that's great. But if you give them a loyalty card which actually says, we want to really actually reward you for those kind of behaviors, that accentuates your credentials, that adds value into that particular process. So every time you hire something, you get a reward. Every time you buy something, it doesn't reward you. So the idea is changing the dynamics within that particular space. It's kind of leaning into the lean lifestyle, the non-asset driven lifestyle within that particular area. And I think more and more people, particularly, are denied from the point of view of higher prices into that particular area. What is it at the end of the day that we can do to create lean living, lean areas of development within that, and revenue streams from the use of inactivity? And one of the primary ones of those, prime good one in terms of the business model, was well, we might don't know whether we're talking about it or not, but Rolls-Royce, who changed the dynamics of their business model from the point of view of their service contract. They would sell a jet engine. That jet engine, at the end of the day, would have a service contract assigned to it. The engine would be, or the plane would be grounded. They would do the service. It was basically the business would pay for that service. The engine would get, the plane would get up in the air again and start, kind of delivering stuff for the aircraft company. The change of the dynamic there was they turned around and said, actually, what we'll do is we will charge you for every mile that you use your aircraft, and we basically will service your engine, and we will pay. Will be in a way lose value because you're not flying. So from that point of view, maybe not necessarily a great example from a sustainability point of view, but from a change in that kind of revenue model and that revenue stream, going from a position of rewarding people or generating revenues from that kind of process of use, not inactivity. One of the businesses locally that's engaged to a degree with that kind of mindset is a business that's over at Wivenhoe, run by Linda Blanchette, who is somebody that's within the community, and the business is called Consciously Clothed. It takes on board previously loved clothing, and it creates a marketplace for that clothing to find new life, extending the value of that clothing in that particular area. She runs pop-up stores, but she has a business over in Wivenhoe, and she's been working on it for some time. I started working with her back in, I guess, a long time ago, probably 2017, 18. But ultimately, this is the culmination of where she is. And it's a really lovely kind of environment, a great business model. We're going to do a case study on her. So we're going to dig deep into her business, into her processes, and ultimately think about, help her to think about how that can become more or greater reach within what she's doing. Wider afield, there's an organization or a business called Swap Fleets, which ultimately provides bikes, but you hire the bike, and there's a leasing contract. They've got a wide range of hiring processes. They operate in London. They operate in many, many different cities across the globe. And that, at the end of the day, is something which is, a service contract. They'll mend it. They'll keep it going. They'll do that. Side of it, they're insured for it, all that kind of thing. They take away all of the headache and they give you this area. They don't sell you a bike, they sell you a service. They sell you that particular aspect of it. So that keeps that process going. The second business model is more about that kind of circular, looking at the value chain within that particular area. In this particular business model, it's actually a best demonstrator in a way. I was thinking about this and doing a bit of research about it. We keep chickens, and we give them mealworms, and the chickens, like the mealworms, they produce the eggs. Then we could potentially repurpose and reuse those eggs for a different, kind of outcome, whether it's plant-based foods, whether it's something along that. You can use the eggshell for many different things. And when I was researching this, I found that it was more interesting because there was another area that went into this. So the mealworms, like I said, are used as chicken feed. Chickens produce the eggs. The eggshells are recovered. And if we think of this at an industrial scale, this is where it actually gets quite interesting. So restaurants, hotels, things like that. So if the eggshells are recovered, providing additional reward to, say, the large egg users like the hotels and people like that. So you could potentially buy that. So it encourages them to separate the eggshells and actually repackage them. But the eggshells have a particular property, which I didn't realize until I started to research it. And they're really good at capturing CO2 from the environment. They can create, both from the point of view of a filtration system within the shell, the membrane that sits within there. that they can capture CO2 from the environment out en masse. So there's technologies out there that can do that. So it's quite an interesting spin out of that particular process. But the other side of it, from a circularity perspective, is you can use the eggshell, which is full of calcium, full of vitamins, full of lots of things, as a food base for the mealworm production. So from that point of view, you can create some sort of kind of food-based things, which will ultimately feed the mealworms before they are then turned into bird food, which then goes back into the whole egg production. That circularity, that whole kind of concept is something which is really interesting, and I think presents some great deal of opportunities within that. And I think that kind of the calcium content of the eggshell, which is that thing at the end of the day which produces that food or nutrients that for the mealworms to feed on, that then goes back into the animal food process. None of this is not happening. It's all happening, right? It's all just how we engage with it in some shape or form, and what does that actually mean for our businesses. So it also is a bit about that kind of psyche. So one of the refillery organizations that are local around here is one called Econes. And they have this kind of model again, where ultimately you go to them with a pre-loved, pre-used bottle, pre-loved, pre-used container, fill it, weigh it, fill it, pay it, move forward. They themselves buy on bike and refill what they have within the shop. That whole kind of circularity process keeps going forward. So they engage with their value chain. Products arrive in bulk, they refill them, they move them forward on that. Again, I'm sure within your regions, I'm sure within Colchester, I know there's in Lee, I know there's loads of different areas around Essex and around the country where these refillery processes are going. But we choose not to engage with them because of it's easier to go into a supermarket and buy those different things, and these places are a bit off track. Maybe that it means I've got to go in with a bag full of recyclable products and all the rest of it. But if we make the effort to do that, then it actually becomes worthwhile. So within that particular area, wider afield, there's an organization called Winnow. And Winnow, they analyze, or they look at food waste. So they spend a lot of time developing different food waste things. They're important for kitchen technology. They're important for restaurants, for hotels, and for various things like that. But this is their process. They weigh, categorize, analyze, advise, and then they avoid. So ultimately, they drive efficiencies through this particular area into the technologies and into the kitchens of these larger organizations. And Winnow being funded quite significantly in that kind of process. So from that point of view, it's been a hugely valuable area. Number 3 on the business model side of things is the ecosystem model. This is where you end up with a platform, something at the end of the day that connects different people to different areas, that allows and facilitates that area of exchange, that area of development. And that breeds in its own right reuse, that repurposes product, but it also at the end of the day provides value for both the user and also the provider of that particular product. So that's again about building these partnerships and collaborations. One business from the region that's really good at that, Rent My, run by a guy called Tom, and Tom West is over in Manningtree. Rent My is there. They've got a platform out there. Their model is very much about creating a side hustle for your own self, so you can rent out your own drills, your own lawnmower, your own whatever it is. They've got an insurance contract or insurance deal on it. It's a great platform. It's local. It's got funding. It's on a journey, and it will, at the end of the day, create that level of, if you like, efficiency between ourselves and the way that we want to live. So this side hustle of being able to actually generate incomes from stuff and assets that we actually own. Further afield, really important to think about is this organization, Deertree, big organization out in China. It really established in 2009. It's a model of circularity. It's around the furniture market and office furniture. But they have 940,000 pieces of furniture, and they reckon at the end of the day, their processes have saved something in the region of 22,000 tons of carbon being produced into the air. So that recircular process of recapturing office furniture, rebuilding it, you're using it, repurposing it, and putting it back in to that area. One last thing I wanted to talk about from my side before we stop this presentation on here and move to, I'm going to put it on to Zoom so that we can actually incorporate Becky on that particular process. So be patient. I'll share a link with you for the Zoom meeting after this one. So ultimately, further afield, what can this do from a point of view of a trade's job, right? This is an imaginary business, an electrician, somebody, let's call them Dan and Jess. They're passionate about the environment and they both want to contribute to a positive future. So they've identified that many sort of kind of older properties want to be retrofitted to be more sustainable. The owners and occupiers, but they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to get on that particular area. They may be, from that point of view, their first experience is they've got an electric car. They want an EV socket established on the building. That's why they called out the electrician. But actually, when they're speaking to the owners of the property, you know, Jess and Dan started to think about, well, what could we do more within this particular field? So they went away, they turned around and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We want to decide that there could be a full market service right within this. Why don't we just retrofit buildings into solar panels, wind turbines, providing the business owners with monthly charts to show the amount of CO2 that they are saving, refit their windows, get a window company to do that, build that ecosystem within that particular space, actually do the whole retrofit of the building, making it more eco-friendly and actually adding that level of service into that particular process. All of that they could do. And at the end of it all, right, I know it sounds like, okay, well, why would they and all this, but it's about the value add. Now they're actually, when you think about it, got something which is relatively unique, can be operated across the country. They've got a big market presence. They're leaning into a very positive trend within that particular area. And they're engaging with the circular economy and the nature of improving the efficiency, reducing energy use, increasing energy production. They could create heat sources. And one of the things that they could also do within this is engage by actually selling, you know, excess capacity back to the grid, creating a passive income for the house and ultimately managed again by the eco-electrician and eco-electrician company. So we're only ever contained by our imagination about what we can and can't do. Partnerships are vital in that particular process. That's my bit. I want to. Okay, we're recording.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. So I am Becky Baines. I founded the Ink Bin back in 2019. That's me back in 2019, looking young and fresh and enthusiastic about circularity and waste. And I made a few notes on some of the things you'd said, actually, James. And one of the things I'm really pleased you picked up on after having sort of been in this industry for 5 years is that you linked that to procurement. And I've been saying for a long time that the marketplace is changing. And I think the marketplace is going to demand that people are sustainable in their business approaches. I think at the moment, large organisations are measuring their scope 1 and 2 emissions if they're doing carbon reporting. So they're measuring the fuel they're using, whether that's the electricity and gas for their premises or whether that's the diesel they're using for their vehicles. But longer term, businesses will be looking at their scope 3 emissions and reporting on those, which will mean they will be asking their suppliers down to the level of what's the carbon value of the pencil I'm buying from you. And I think we will be seeing that more and more. And I think I'm very much a person completely focused on climate change and very, very passionate about doing everything I can for climate change. But I do think if we look at this from a business and marketplace point of view, I think that's very much where everyone is going. The marketplace is going that way. And I think we all need to adapt to that. So I'm really pleased you picked up on that point. the other point before I start and talk about my business was that I was in Essex Waste Strategy meeting last week for businesses. And the thing that I found really interesting was that 5% of the costs of a business are to do with waste disposal. And I see waste as an opportunity. And I see very much that I don't want to produce waste in the first place. If it's going to cost me money to get rid of, and it's going to literally be waste, I don't want it. So I do everything I possibly can in my own business to reduce waste, down to the big workbenches I use. I've made out of old pallets. All of my office furniture and equipment is secondhand, is pilfered from various places. It's kept the cost down of me establishing a young business 5 years ago, but it's also reduced my carbon footprint by really thinking about what I've got in my business premises, why it's there, where it's come from as well. And the final thing, also as an aside, that just sort of got me thinking when you were chatting, was as well that with the Environment Act 2021, new regulations are starting to filter through, and businesses are going to be up against stricter regulations for the waste they do produce. So again, you know, trying to actually produce less waste in the first place. So there were my little thinkings. So I follow quite carefully the circularity gap, and every year they produce a report, and I thought I like a few stats, so I thought I'd share a few stats on what the latest report has said, which is that we are starting to talk about the circular economy, we're starting to think about it, but circularity is still in decline, and consumption rates are hugely going up. So we are using more and more. We used 28% of all the materials humanity has consumed since 1900. We have to, as human beings, just think about what we're consuming and see if we can reduce that. I don't think we need to do that with a rash vest approach, but I do think that we all need to be aware of what we consume as human beings, as well as in our businesses. The best quote I've ever read, used very widely, is we don't need one person doing it perfectly, we need 1 million people doing it imperfectly. And I think with fledgling businesses and entrepreneurs, it's a perfect opportunity to start designing businesses with sustainability in mind in the first place. And manufactured goods such as vehicles, textiles, appliances and equipment and their associated production process are big employers, but I hope you can't hear my children screaming in the background. Production processes rely on fossil fuels, currently drive 1/3 of the overshot onto the climate change. Materials and energy intensive industrial activities are linked to deforestation and drive 15% on both the land use and freshwater planetary boundaries. And manufacturing goods results in substantial amounts of hazardous industrial waste. As well as we talk a lot about carbon, but water is going to be coming onto the agenda more and more over the next 5 to 10 years. And we are going to, regulations are coming into place to say that residents and businesses will need to use less water. Again, an offside, if anyone wants to do any reading, Essex County Council have just produced their water strategy, which is really interesting reading as well. So that's why I'm a geek on this. I care. My children will tell you if they break something, I will say that's had to come from, you know, potentially Asia. That's been produced. That's somebody has had to manufacture that, and that's got a carbon value to it, and we're having to throw it in the bin. So it's a mindset change that I think gets a little bit obsessive for me anyway. So my business is based in printer ink consumables and sending them back into the circular economy. I set it up in 2019, and here are some of the headline figures for why I care. Producing one single inkjet cartridge uses approximately 3 ounces of oil. The water stats for that aren't available, but I'm sure the water use is pretty horrendous. The voltaic organic compounds which pollute the soil and water, if they do end up in landfill, are pretty horrific. It will take up to 1,000 years if we throw a small home use ink cartridge into landfill. It will take up to 1,000 years for that to decompose. Here's the big one for me that is why I do what I do. An ink cartridge can be refilled up to 7 times. they're so easy to send back into remanufacture. Once they have sort of seen their life, once the chips are defunct and they can't be used anymore, that plastic can be shredded up for use in the non-virgin plastic market. So hence, this is sort of the basis of my business, is that I will take in home use printer cartridges and I will send them back fully into the circular economy. Remanufacturing the printer consumables in the UK reduces emissions from transport. I made a commitment a long time ago that I would not sell my products back to Asia. I preferably, wherever I can, try and keep them out of Europe. I try and keep them in the UK, just simply to reduce the emissions from transportation. Interestingly enough as well, I'll talk about in a little while how I did a life cycle analysis. One of the big things that came out that I learned through doing a life cycle analysis of my business was that the energy efficiencies in Asia are a lot lower than in the UK. So using any sort of manufacturing process in the UK is automatically going to be more environmentally ethical, because our factories, for want of a better word, are more efficient. And 375 million of these babies end up in landfill every single year. So that's where I came in. That's where I came in, the ink bin solution. So this was me and my boys back in 2019. We came up with a process whereby we wanted to get rid of the plastic envelope return scheme. So plastic envelope return schemes have been around for years and years and years. And you pop your envelopes into the post and they go back and they will be remanufactured. Obviously, a lot of people aren't using those anyway, because 375 million of them end up in landfill. But for me, I was thinking, well, why are we using plastic envelopes? Why are we making a huge amount of journeys when we could collect them in bulk and do it in a few journeys? And very geekily, I can tell you that the average collection that we have from one of those ink bins is 192 cartridges. So I work on the basis that, you know, I collect 192 of them in one go rather than two, to reduce transport carbon emissions. I'm a teacher originally by profession, so I don't tend to do it so much anymore, but for a long time I would go into schools and talk about the work I do, and I would produce free environmental educational resources. And then you can see me in my great big business unit with my palette platform, where I do a lot of the work. That is back in the very early days, because they are brand new boxes that were purchased there for me to send my products off. I don't buy anything in anymore. Every last box is reused. Every pallet that I come across is reused to send products off, and every single box is probably used half a dozen times. It's a bit of a treasure trove of rubbish in there. So that was my solution. Initially, I started out very much focusing on schools, because I know that children are particularly passionate about recycling, waste minimisation. So these were the very early days up in the top left, when we started out with schools, and the pupils would collect them from parents, carers, the wider community. And it's just grown and grown. We did some work with Waitrose, which was phenomenally exciting, but we also work with businesses who support the schools, charities and so on as well. So the bit I have forgotten to say is that as part of the process, because these ink cartridges go back into remanufacture, some of those have got value, and we will give a large proportion of that back to charitable groups as well. So all the work we do, the group that sends it in, or a designated charity, will get some funds back as well. And the bottom left-hand corner was one of my customers who just sent me her children sorting it out. So I had to include that, because it made my day. But also, as I said, we know that the next generation are really passionate about this. So as well as it kind of, I like to think I'm kind of doing my UN Sustainable Development Goals here by doing, you know, the charitable side, the engagement side, making it quite holistic and meaningful. And it is what drives me forward every day with the business.
Fabulous.
So I do a lot of engagement work. with the people I work with. So Colcheco is actually the Colchester version of Ecolns. They're up on Layer Road, and they've got an ink bin in there where people go and people who are going to, you know, refill their consumables for the kitchen and the bathroom will take the cartridges back there, work with Rachel and she'll send them back. But all the way along the route, I try and engage people to allow them to understand the positive impact they've had, whether that's the money that they've raised for a local charity or whether that's the amount of plastic they've saved from landfill. One of the other things that's been really quite interesting has been that businesses have been really involved with this as well along the way. We've had a lot of businesses say, well, we want to support this. We'll purchase an ink bin for our local school, and potentially we'll see if we can find a community drop-off point for that. So EV Connectors is a business in Bardfield, and they sponsored that bin for the local primary school, and that's actually in the foyer of the local co-op there, so the whole area can drop off their cartridges. And so that not being enough for me, because I'm a bit of a carbon geek, I was given the opportunity by Innovate UK to conduct a life cycle assessment of the business. So worked with Innovate UK and the Materials Processing Institute, and together we pulled together a load of data, the journey distances for my bins, various other bits, where they go to, all sorts of different things, and they compared my carbon, my processes, and they actually compared them against two other models as well, one of which was a different type of company that would do the same process but in a different way, and the other was if I was doing the same process but actually sending all my products off to Asia to be remanufactured, which I would be more profitable if I did. I'd get higher values out there, but you know, James, I'm quite a stubborn lady, and I'd refuse to do that. So that was a really interesting piece of work that I did with Innovate UK, and I'm really pleased to say the results were fantastic. It did prove that we are very environmentally conscious, and hopefully one of the best in the UK at what we're doing with regards to environmental sustainability. So how do I do that? So this is sort of going back to the process of sort of how I said the model usually works. So over, you know, the last 20 or 30 years, there have been envelope return schemes. You'd return 2 cartridges at a time, and they would probably make a few journeys around. Whereas with us, you would drop your cartridges into a community collection point. We wouldn't be collecting those cartridges until that bin was reasonably full. We never collect back the original bin, because it would be madness to have a lovely fresh facing bin replaced every few months, remanufactured. So I say to my customers, please send me a grotty, disgusting cardboard box as long as it's strong enough, and I will reuse it my end if I can, and if not, it will get recycled. So that's sort of the crux of where the life cycle assessment came from. And this is how I like to think of working. So this is sort of the Asian model versus my model, which is we will pick it up in a little van. The Asian model first, it will get collected, it will get shipped off on a container over to Asia, and then eventually get shipped back as a remanufactured ink cartridge. We will be doing it without a huge amount of that process. At the moment, because we are still quite small, we're not quite at electric van stage. It would be fantastic if we were, but it's just cutting out as much of the process as possible, simplifying it. And one of the things at this point I'll say as well, I've not used them, but I know you mentioned sustainable transport, the Colchester e-cargo bike scheme and Lee Pugh. It's fantastic. Any sort of young businesses in Colchester who do some sort of hopping around the town, definitely look up the e-cargo bike scheme, because it's a fantastic opportunity. And the piece of work that we took on a year, 18 months ago now is my most exciting to date, which is we work with Essex County Council with their library service, and we have bins in all 74 Essex libraries, which was lovely, absolutely fantastic to do. And some of the feedback early on was great, that, you know, residents were also saying another fantastic opportunity to keep our libraries alive and people to go in. But from my point of view, from a sustainability point of view, the exciting thing about this was that early on we had the discussions with Essex County Council that their library vans are out on the roads all the time. Why would we be sending another van to go and collect from one library when we can use their vans? And that really is my ultimate model of where, you know, I'd love the business to be developing and growing, is working with organisations who've got their own vehicles on the road and will be doing our collections for us, and we will then take them all in much bigger bulk, reducing transportation carbon emissions. So that is, I believe that's my last slide, and that is the ink bin.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Brilliant. And in terms of kind of, I'll stop the recording because I do want to carry on just a conversation, but thank you very much indeed, Becky. I'll come back and finish off